Jonathan Blake, a 38-year-old millionaire CEO in Manhattan, built his empire from ambition and control, but lost his heart the day she walked away, never telling him she was pregnant. One rainy night, on a nearly empty subway platform, Jonathan sees an 11-year-old boy selling candy. Blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, just like his. When the boy, Lucas, quietly shows him a crumpled train ticket with Jonathan's name on it, time freezes. It's the exact one he gave Lucas's mother years ago. Could this boy be his son? Haunted by regret and aching with hope, Jonathan takes Lucas in, buying clothes, calling doctors, and ordering a DNA test. As answers unfold, guilt deepens. Lucas has survived alone, underground, while Jonathan soared above in glass towers. Will this boy accept the father he never knew? Can a penthouse become a home for a child who only knew tunnels? And when the world learns the truth, can Jonathan protect their fragile bond from public scrutiny? A battered train ticket becomes a symbol of redemption, a journey back to fatherhood, and a second chance neither saw coming. Subscribe to see this heartfelt story unfold. The hum of city lights faded as Jonathan Blake stepped off the elevator into his silent penthouse. 38 floors above Manhattan, the world below looked small, distant, like his memories. He loosened his tie, dropped his briefcase near the velvet couch, and walked to the window. Glass stretched from floor to ceiling, but it couldn't reflect what weighed on him. The penthouse gleamed. Art-lined walls, leather chairs, a piano no one played. Success surrounded him, yet emptiness echoed louder than any jazz tune he once loved. His fingers brushed a small framed photo on a side table. A woman with sun-kissed hair smiled beside him. Her name was Elise. She left without a goodbye 11 years ago. That smile? It still haunted him. He had searched at first, desperately, but no trace, no closure, and no child, he'd thought, until now. The subway trembled beneath the streets as Jonathan descended the station steps. His driver had offered to wait, but he waved him off. A late meeting had run long, and something about the quiet subway tonight felt oddly welcome. That's when he saw him. The boy was standing by a cracked pillar, holding a tray of cheap candy taped together with scotch. Blonde hair fell over big blue eyes. Eyes Jonathan had seen before. In a mirror, in that photo. He stopped walking. The boy's voice was soft. "Candy, sir? Just $1." Jonathan blinked. The resemblance wasn't just coincidence. The bone structure, the gaze, the shy stance, it was like staring at a version of himself from long ago. "What's your name?" Jonathan asked, kneeling slightly. "Lucas," the boy answered. "I'm 11. Jonathan hesitated, then reached into his coat for his wallet. His hands shook more than he expected. "Where's your mom?" Lucas lowered his eyes. "She went away, long time ago. I live in the station now, mostly." The words landed hard. "Do you have anyone?" Lucas shook his head. "Just this." He reached into his hoodie and pulled out a worn train ticket, edges frayed. It was hers. She said it was from someone important. "From the day I was made." Jonathan took the slip gently, and his breath caught. It was his. The ticket bore his name and the exact date he remembered, 11 years ago, the last night with Elise. He had taken her to Hudson Valley, a final getaway before she vanished. He never thought he'd see that ticket again. "Where did you get this?" Jonathan whispered. "My mom kept it in a box," Lucas said. "Said he was someone important, but didn't want me." Jonathan's stomach twisted. "That's not true." Lucas looked at him, cautious but curious. "Do you know him?" Jonathan stared at the boy. "I think I do." The platform rumbled as a train approached, but Jonathan didn't move. He reached out, touched Lucas's shoulder, then pulled his jacket tighter around the boy's small frame. "Come with me," he said. "Please." Lucas hesitated, but the way Jonathan spoke, it wasn't an order. It was a plea, a warmth he hadn't heard in years. The train roared past without them. Together they climbed the steps, back into the cold, blinking city lights. Inside the sleek black car, Lucas clutched the candy tray with both hands. "Where are we going?" he asked. "To get you checked out, to get you something warm to eat, and after that," Jonathan paused, "we talk." Lucas looked out the window as the city blurred by. "Why are you helping me?" Jonathan stared at the train ticket still in his hand. The ink faded, but the meaning now painfully clear. Because someone should have, a long time ago. From the back seat, Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper, an old drawing. It was crude but clear, a man in a suit, holding hands with a boy beside a train. "I made this," Lucas said. "Been carrying it, just in case." Jonathan took it with trembling hands. "I think you just found the right just in case," he whispered. The drawing, warm in his hand, pulsed like a promise. A second chance had arrived, and it came with blue eyes and a train ticket. The SUV pulled up to a corner diner just before midnight, its neon sign flickering weakly in the fog. Inside, the booths were half empty. A tired waitress poured coffee behind the counter. Jonathan held the door open for Lucas, who stepped in slowly, still gripping his candy tray like a shield. "Pick any booth," Jonathan said gently. Lucas chose the one in the back near the heater. He sat stiffly, legs swinging above the floor. Jonathan slid in across from him, placing the crumpled train ticket and the drawing between them like fragile proof. A waitress approached, her eyes darting from the boy's dirt-smudged hands to Jonathan's tailored coat. "Menus?" "Hot chocolate for him. Coffee, black for me," Jonathan said, not breaking eye contact with Lucas. When they were alone again, Jonathan leaned in. "Do you remember your mom? Anything she said about me?" Lucas traced a finger along the drawing. "She didn't say your name, just that he had a job with numbers and wore suits. She said he didn't want us." Jonathan inhaled sharply. "That's not true. I didn't even know." Lucas shrugged. "It's okay. People don't stay. I got used to it." Those words hit harder than any accusation. Jonathan looked down at the train ticket, then back at the boy. "Do you trust me?" Lucas didn't answer right away. Then he pointed at the drawing. "I wouldn't still carry this if I didn't hope." The hot chocolate arrived, and Lucas cupped it in both hands like it was gold. Jonathan watched him sip slowly, carefully, as if afraid it might disappear. "How long have you been on your own?" Jonathan asked softly. Lucas looked at the steam rising from his cup. "Since last winter. I was with a lady named Miss Carla for a bit, but she got sick. After that I moved around. Sometimes the subway, sometimes rooftops." Jonathan clenched his fists beneath the table. "You've been alone that long?" Lucas nodded, unconcerned. "I sell candy, sleep light. I'm good at hiding." A lump rose in Jonathan's throat. "You shouldn't have to be good at that." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek business card and placing it beside the ticket. "My name is Jonathan Blake. I run a company called Westbridge Financial, but none of that matters right now. What matters is you." Lucas stared at the card. "That your real name?" "It is. And tomorrow, we'll go somewhere safe. You'll meet a doctor. Eat real food. I'll call someone to help figure out everything." Lucas looked out the window at the fog curling around street lamps. "What if I don't belong? What if it's not real?" Jonathan leaned forward, his voice low. "We're going to find out together. No more guesses, no more maybe." Lucas blinked quickly, then reached into his hoodie again. He pulled out a paper napkin, folded carefully. Inside was another drawing, this one of a tall building with stars above it. At the top, 2 stick figures stood side by side. "This one's from last week," Lucas said. "I imagined what it'd be like if we found each other. I drew it so I wouldn't forget what I wanted." Jonathan unfolded the napkin fully, swallowing hard. "You dreamed this?" Lucas nodded. "I never stopped." Outside, a siren howled far away. The city was never still, but inside that booth, something shifted. 2 strangers, joined by ink and memory, and maybe blood. Jonathan stood. "Come on, let's find you a warm bed." Lucas followed, one hand holding the cup, the other gripping his tray. As they stepped out into the night, the folded napkin drawing slipped from Jonathan's pocket and floated to the floor. The waitress bent to pick it up. She paused, seeing the stars and the 2 figures drawn beneath them. "Looks like family," she murmured. But Jonathan and Lucas were already gone, swallowed into the fog, walking side by side. A man reclaiming time. A boy still daring to believe. Morning light broke through a pale gray sky as Jonathan and Lucas stepped into the quiet warmth of a midtown hotel suite. It wasn't the penthouse, too soon for that, but the room had soft sheets, a working heater, and a view of the city skyline. For now, it was safe. Lucas dropped his candy tray near the sofa and looked around, wide-eyed. "This is where we're staying?" Jonathan nodded, setting his briefcase down. "Just for a night. Tomorrow, we go see a doctor and a friend of mine, a lawyer. They'll help with everything." Lucas wandered to the window, forehead nearly pressed to the glass. "It looks different from up here." Jonathan joined him, eyes following the crisscross of yellow cabs below. "You've seen the city from down there for too long." Lucas glanced at him. "You talk different from other people." Jonathan smiled slightly. "I've been in boardrooms too long. I'll work on it." Lucas paused, then pulled something from his hoodie pocket, a small, bent Polaroid. The edges were soft from years of handling. "This is the only picture I have of my mom." Jonathan took it carefully. The woman in the photo was young, wind-blown hair, standing on a beach with a plastic shovel in hand. Her smile froze his heart. "Elise," he whispered. Lucas looked up sharply. "You knew her?" Jonathan nodded, slowly sinking into the nearest chair. "She was special. We were together once, briefly. She left without saying goodbye." "She told me you were a traveler," Lucas said, "that you had to leave." Jonathan's voice dropped. "She never told me about you." Lucas sat across from him. "She said people with power don't like being tied down." Jonathan stared at the photo. "Maybe I didn't deserve to know, but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving." The boy nodded, but didn't speak. Silence filled the space between them, thick, uncertain, but not cold. Later that morning, they rode in silence to a private clinic tucked near Central Park. Dr. Sienna Graves, mid-40s, with kind eyes and salt-streaked hair, greeted them in the waiting room. "Jonathan," she said, hugging him briefly, "you didn't say it was urgent." He gestured to Lucas. "I need a full checkup. And a DNA test. Confidential." Dr. Graves blinked, then knelt beside Lucas. "Hey, kiddo, I'm Sienna. We're going to do a few tests. Nothing scary. Sound good?" Lucas nodded. "Okay." Jonathan waited outside the exam room, pacing the hallway. His hands trembled as he stared at the Polaroid again, thumb brushing the corner. So many years. So many unanswered questions. Elise had been pregnant and never told him. The door opened. Lucas walked out holding a juice box. Dr. Graves followed. "He's underweight but stable. No infections. A little malnourished. And we drew blood for the paternity test. We'll have results by morning." Jonathan exhaled. "Thank you." As they left the clinic, Lucas spoke quietly. "Do you think she didn't tell you because she was mad?" Jonathan looked down. "Maybe, or maybe she thought I wouldn't care." Lucas kicked a pebble along the sidewalk. "Would you have?" Jonathan stopped. "Yes, I would have looked for you." Lucas shrugged. I kept hoping that you'd show up one day. I used to tell the tunnels that. That night, back in the hotel, Lucas climbed onto the bed with his backpack. He dug through it, then pulled out a crumpled envelope. I found this in her stuff, he said. It was never mailed. Jonathan opened it carefully. Inside was a short letter, written in Elise's handwriting. I wanted to tell you, Jonathan, but I saw the world you lived in, and I wasn't part of it. If Lucas ever finds you, I hope he sees the man I once loved. Jonathan's eyes blurred. He folded the letter and held it tight. You did find me, he said softly. Lucas looked over. Does this mean we're really family? Jonathan reached into his briefcase and took out a small model train. He set it on the table between them. I used to collect these. I want you to have it. Lucas held the train, eyes wide. This is cool. Every journey needs a track, Jonathan said. We're building one now. And for the first time, Lucas smiled. Under the soft glow of a bedside lamp, the hotel room hummed with quiet. Lucas sat cross-legged on the bed, rolling the tiny metal train along a pillow edge. The crumpled Polaroid of Elise lay nearby, face up. Her smile held the past, but the boy across from him, he was the future. Jonathan stood by the window, phone to his ear. Yes, DNA sample submitted yesterday. No names in the system. Expedite results. Confidential. A pause. Thank you. He turned, met Lucas's eyes. The boy wasn't asking questions, but his gaze was full of them. Jonathan crossed the room, kneeling beside the bed. You okay? Lucas nodded. I like this place. It smells like lemons and heat. Jonathan chuckled softly. I'll remember that. There was a beat of silence. Then Lucas said, Do you think I look like you? Jonathan studied his face. Same eyes, same chin, same stubborn jaw. Lucas grinned. Mom said I get my quiet from her, though. Jonathan looked down. I think she was right. Lucas's smile faded. Do you miss her? Jonathan swallowed. More than I can explain. The boy stared at the ceiling. I used to think if I drew her enough, she'd come back. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded page. It was a colored pencil sketch of Elise holding a boy's hand beside a subway train. Above them, a tall man stood, faceless. This was the first time I tried to draw you, Lucas said, before I knew your name. Jonathan's throat tightened. You gave me a face when I didn't even know I was missing. Lucas tilted his head. You didn't think about her? Not once? Jonathan's voice softened. Every day. I just thought, she chose to disappear. Lucas looked away. She didn't choose to be alone. She cried a lot when she thought I was asleep. Jonathan sat on the edge of the bed, eyes heavy. I should have looked harder. I shouldn't have assumed she was gone for good. The next morning, a knock at the hotel room door interrupted breakfast. Jonathan opened it to find a slim man in a dark coat holding a file. Mr. Blake, your request. Jonathan took the folder, shut the door, and opened it at the table. DNA results, no doubts. Lucas, he said gently. It's official. The boy looked up from his toast. What is? Jonathan turned the paper so he could read it. You're mine. Biologically. Legally. That's next. Lucas blinked fast. So, I really belong to somebody. Jonathan knelt in front of him. You always did. We just didn't know it. That afternoon, they moved into Jonathan's penthouse. As the elevator rose, Lucas clutched his backpack tight. The doors opened with a soft chime. Floor-to-ceiling windows, velvet rugs, a fireplace he'd never seen lit. Lucas stepped in slowly, his sneakers leaving faint prints on polished wood. This is your house, Jonathan nodded. Our home now. You can pick your room. Lucas wandered through the space like a museum, finally choosing a smaller bedroom near the back. Jonathan followed him in. We can change anything you want. Paint, furniture. I want it to feel like you. Lucas set his train on the nightstand. "I don't need much." Jonathan noticed him glancing at the closet. Dozens of new clothes hung inside, tags still on. "I had those delivered," Jonathan said. "Thought you'd need them." Lucas stared. "They look expensive." "They're just clothes," Jonathan replied. Lucas turned away. "I've worn the same jacket for 2 years. Those don't feel like mine." Jonathan didn't push. Instead, he stepped back and said, "We'll figure it out together." That night, Lucas sat by the fireplace, drawing again. Jonathan watched from the kitchen, letting the moment breathe. Then Lucas said, "She told me not everyone who disappears wants to." Jonathan crossed the room, sat beside him on the rug. "She was right." Lucas handed him the newest drawing. It was the 3 of them, him, Elise, and Jonathan. This time, Jonathan had a face. Underneath it, Lucas had written, "Don't disappear again." Jonathan pressed the page to his chest. "I won't," he whispered. "Not ever." Jonathan's penthouse hummed with quiet as early sun filtered through the tall windows. The boy-sized footprints from last night had vanished beneath fresh polish. In the guest bedroom, Lucas was curled beneath thick blankets, the toy train still clutched in his hand. Jonathan stood at the kitchen counter, watching coffee drip slowly. He hadn't slept much. His mind churned. DNA confirmed it. The boy was his. But what now? Parenting wasn't a boardroom. There were no quarterly reports, no performance metrics, just trust and time. By mid-morning, Lucas appeared, hair tousled, still wearing the same hoodie. "Morning," Jonathan said, trying to sound casual. Lucas yawned. "Your floor's too soft. I thought I was falling." Jonathan smiled. "We can get a firmer rug." Lucas wandered to the kitchen island. "What's that smell?" "Scrambled eggs. Real ones. Not the vending machine kind." Lucas hesitated, then climbed onto the bar stool. "You cook?" Jonathan cracked a small grin. "Let's say I manage." They ate quietly, but something was different. Less tension, more curiosity. After breakfast, Jonathan held up a small envelope. "We have a doctor's note clearing you for school," he said, "and I've spoken to a tutor." Lucas paused, fork in midair. "Like regular school? Not yet? One-on-one? A gentle start?" Lucas looked uncertain. "What if I'm bad at it?" Jonathan leaned forward. "Then we'll try again. There's no test you have to pass to be my son." Lucas lowered his eyes, nodding slowly. "Okay." Later that afternoon, Jonathan took him to a boutique downtown, polished wood floors, mirrors lined with soft lights, a quiet place that didn't feel overwhelming. A tall woman approached. "Mr. Blake, welcome." "Lucas," Jonathan said, placing a hand on his son's back. "Pick what you like." Lucas stared at the shelves. The rows of shoes, folded shirts, unfamiliar textures. He took a step back. I don't know," he mumbled. The woman smiled kindly. "Would you like to see the soft jackets?" Lucas shook his head and walked out the door. Jonathan followed, catching up to him on the sidewalk. "I didn't mean to push," he said. Lucas looked up, frustrated. "I don't want clothes that don't feel like me." Jonathan exhaled. "What does feel like you?" Lucas opened his backpack and pulled out the crumpled hoodie. "This, not tags and collars. This is me." Jonathan crouched beside him, and we start there. That evening, back at the penthouse, Jonathan pulled out an old wooden box from his closet. Inside were objects from his own childhood, photos, coins, a pressed train ticket from a trip with his father. He brought it to Lucas's room. "Want to see something?" he asked. Lucas nodded, curious. Jonathan opened the box, revealing its contents. Among them, a tarnished compass, small but solid. "This," he said, placing the compass in Lucas's hand, "was my grandfather's. He gave it to me when I was 10. Lucas turned it over. "Does it still work?" "Only when you're really lost," Jonathan said with a smile. Lucas chuckled. Guess we both need to. That night, Lucas placed the compass on his nightstand right next to the toy train. 2 symbols now, one of motion, one of direction. Before lights out, Lucas hesitated at the doorway. "Hey, Jonathan?" Jonathan looked up from a folder. "Yeah?" Lucas bit his lip. "Do I have to call you Jonathan forever?" Jonathan froze, then slowly said, "You can call me whatever feels right." Lucas nodded, stepping away. But just before closing his door, he whispered, "Night, Dad." Jonathan didn't move for a moment. Then he smiled, a quiet, full smile. For the first time in years, the penthouse didn't feel empty. It felt like home. The city moved fast, but that morning, time slowed for Jonathan Blake. Lucas had gone with the tutor to the library downstairs, giving Jonathan a rare pocket of quiet. He stood in the sunlit kitchen, sipping coffee, staring at the compass on the counter. The same one Lucas had placed beside his train last night. One hand held the past, the other, the future. His phone buzzed. "Mr. Blake," said the voice on the line, "we finished the background investigation." Jonathan straightened. "Go ahead." Elise Montgomery passed away 9 months ago. Cause of death, untreated pneumonia. She had no listed family. She'd moved 6 times in 4 years, no job history after 2020. Jonathan gripped the edge of the counter. "And the boy?" Lucas was off the radar. No school enrollment, no social services. She never registered him anywhere. Jonathan felt sick. She was hiding. Maybe from shame. Or maybe she believed she had to. He hung up, walked to his office, and opened the locked drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside was a leather notebook, Elise's journal. She had given it to him the week before she disappeared. He'd never read past the first page. Now, he flipped through. Most entries were short, wistful, then one stopped him cold. "He deserves better than my mess. If he ever finds this, tell him I tried. I really did." Just then, a knock. Lucas peeked in, cheeks flushed from excitement. "Dad, I learned about constellations, and look what I made." He held up a drawing. Stars, a subway train, and 2 stick figures standing on a platform beneath Orion's belt. Jonathan smiled. "That's incredible." Lucas beamed. "Miss Clara says I'm good at details." Jonathan knelt, touched the corner of the paper. "You really are." Later that afternoon, Lucas napped in his room, curled beside his open backpack. Jonathan called his lawyer, Evan Marsh. "I want full guardianship," he said firmly. Evan cleared his throat. "You don't need to rush. I need to protect him. If something happened to me right now, he'd have nothing." Evan paused. "It's complicated. No will from Elise. No record she named you as father. You'll need court approval." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Then we do it properly." That evening, while Lucas sketched by the window, Jonathan filed the paperwork. Custody hearings, background checks, interviews. But something gnawed at him. A missing piece. The next morning, he met Evan outside a small brownstone near East Harlem. "What's this?" Evan handed him a folder. Elise's last address. Landlord's name is Felicia Gordon. She kept a box of Elise's things. Thought you might want them. They climbed the stairs. The hallway smelled of old wood and lavender cleaner. Felicia opened the door, holding a shoebox wrapped in twine. "She was a sweet girl," she said softly, too proud to ask for help. Jonathan took the box. "Thank you." Back home, he opened it on the living room floor. Inside, letters, sketches, a photo of Elise holding baby Lucas in a thrift store rocking chair. But beneath it all was a folded envelope addressed in shaky handwriting. "To Jonathan, if this ever reaches you." He opened it with trembling hands. "I didn't tell you because I was scared. Of your world, of mine. But Lucas deserves more. If you found him, that means I was right to hope. Please don't let him feel like I did. Like love had conditions." Jonathan stared at the page, then slowly walked into Lucas's room. The boy looked up from his train set. "Everything okay?" Jonathan knelt beside him, holding out the letter. "Your mom left this, for both of us." Lucas read it quietly, then looked away. "Do you miss her?" he whispered. "Every day," Jonathan said, "but she gave me the greatest gift." Lucas tilted his head. "What?" Jonathan smiled gently. "You." Lucas climbed into his lap and leaned against him, small hands wrapping around Jonathan's arm. Outside, the city buzzed on. But in that room, surrounded by drawings and toy trains, a new kind of quiet took root. The kind only love can grow. The hearing room was quiet, sterile, filled with pale walls and long shadows from the blinds. Jonathan sat in a pressed navy suit, but his foot tapped anxiously beneath the table. Lucas sat beside him in a button-up shirt he didn't like, nervously folding and unfolding the same drawing of his train. Evan, their lawyer, leaned in. "Judge Reynolds is fair, but we need to prove more than paternity. You're asking to change everything about this boy's life." Jonathan nodded. "I'm not asking for anything he doesn't deserve." Across the room, a court-appointed child welfare representative looked over her clipboard. Her expression was unreadable. "Do I have to talk?" Lucas whispered. Jonathan bent close. "Only if you want to. But just be you. That's all I ever ask." The door opened, and Judge Reynolds entered. Gray-haired, sharp-eyed, she carried a presence that stilled the room. "We're here to review the guardianship petition for Lucas Montgomery," she said, glancing at them both. "Let's proceed." The lawyer laid out the facts. Paternity, background, Elise's death, Jonathan's willingness to support and care for the child. But then the representative spoke. "We acknowledge Mr. Blake's resources and intentions. However, the child has lived independently. Immediate placement in such a high-profile environment may cause emotional strain." Jonathan stood. "He's not a case number. He's my son." The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Blake, I will allow a short recess. Please step outside with Lucas." In the hallway, Lucas gripped Jonathan's hand. "Did we mess up?" "No," Jonathan said firmly. "But sometimes people don't believe what they can't explain." Lucas opened his backpack and pulled out his latest drawing. This one showed a courthouse with him and Jonathan standing in front. A large heart floated above them. "I drew this during breakfast," he murmured. "I thought it might help." Jonathan crouched. "Lucas, this is the best evidence I could give." They re-entered the room. Jonathan handed the paper to the judge. "She's gone," he said softly. "Elise, and I can't undo that. But this boy, he's more than a responsibility. He's my redemption." The judge studied the picture for a long time, then she looked up. "I'm granting temporary custody, pending follow-up reports. Mr. Blake, you'll be reviewed monthly. Continue providing emotional and educational support. Mr. Marsh, the paperwork will follow." Jonathan exhaled, chest rising with a mix of relief and disbelief. Lucas blinked. "Did we win?" Jonathan smiled, eyes damp. "We're on our way." That evening, back at the penthouse, Lucas stood in the center of his room, looking uncertain. "You okay?" Jonathan asked from the doorway. Lucas nodded slowly. "Can I paint one wall?" Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "What color?" Lucas thought. "Midnight blue, like the sky in my drawings." Jonathan grinned. "Deal." Later, as they brushed on the first coat together, Lucas said, "You didn't give up on me, even when they didn't believe." Jonathan dipped his brush again. "Because you're not a maybe. You're mine." Lucas smiled. "You know what I want to be?" "What?" "A lawyer, like Evan, but I'd wear sneakers and bring snacks." Jonathan laughed. "We'll start with school, then courtrooms." Lucas paused, then opened his drawer and pulled out the compass again. "I want to take this to school," he said, "so I don't forget where I came from." Jonathan gently touched the boy's shoulder. "And where you're going." As they cleaned up, Jonathan noticed something taped to the back of the drawing Lucas had handed the judge. It was a message, in Lucas's handwriting. "Please, let me stay with my dad. He knows how to find me now." Jonathan read it twice, heart thudding. He didn't say anything, just folded the drawing and placed it in the keepsake box beside the photo of Elise. A new chapter had begun. With midnight paint on the wall, a compass in a backpack, and a boy who finally felt found. The scent of fresh paint lingered in the room as Lucas stood at the center, inspecting his wall. Midnight blue stretched from floor to ceiling. Tiny, glow-in-the-dark stars dotted the top edge. His idea. Jonathan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching quietly. "It looks like space," Lucas whispered. "It looks like you," Jonathan replied. Lucas smiled faintly, but something in his eyes had shifted. Quieter. Distant. At breakfast, Lucas barely touched his eggs. His fingers traced circles around the rim of his glass. Jonathan noticed. "Bad dream?" Lucas shook his head. "No. Just thinking." "About what?" Jonathan asked. Lucas glanced down. "What if you stop wanting me around?" Jonathan dropped his fork. "Why would you say that?" Lucas shrugged. "I heard someone at the library say rich people get bored fast, that they trade stuff in when it stops being new." Jonathan felt his stomach tighten. "You're not stuff, Lucas. You're my son." "But what if I mess up?" Lucas asked. "What if I don't know how to be in your world?" Jonathan leaned in. "Then we make a new one that fits both of us." Lucas nodded, but didn't lift his head. That afternoon, during tutoring, Lucas snapped his pencil and refused a second one. He pushed away the workbook, folded his arms, and turned his face to the window. Jonathan, standing just outside the glass doors, saw it all. Later, when the tutor left, he entered quietly. "Want to talk?" Lucas stared at the skyline. It's hard being someone now. Jonathan sat beside him on the carpet. "You were someone before." Lucas's voice cracked, but no one saw it. Jonathan looked down at the train set on the rug. One piece of track had been removed. The train sat crooked. "I was scared, too," Jonathan admitted. "When I found out about you, I didn't know if I'd be good at this." Lucas turned. "You were scared?" "Terrified," Jonathan said. "What if I wasn't enough? What if I couldn't undo the time we lost?" Lucas was quiet for a long time. Then he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out the compass again. "It only works when you're lost, right?" Jonathan smiled. "That's what they say." Lucas handed it over. "I think you need it today." Jonathan turned the compass slowly in his palm. "I want to try again tomorrow," Lucas said. "But not at the table. Can we do math with the train instead?" Jonathan nodded. "Deal." That evening they sat in the living room with a blanket tent draped over the couch. Lucas sorted flashcards while Jonathan timed the train's loops. One card had a small doodle on the back, a stick figure with messy hair and a speech bubble. "You're doing okay." Jonathan chuckled. "Did you draw that?" Lucas nodded. "In case you forget." Jonathan tapped the card. "This one's staying on my desk." That night, after Lucas fell asleep under his constellation wall, Jonathan stared at the ceiling in his own room. He had built skyscrapers, closed billion-dollar deals, reshaped financial maps across continents. But nothing had required more faith than loving someone who'd spent years learning not to expect it. His phone buzzed. A message from Evan. "Judge Reynolds approved extended custody. You're clear to begin full transition steps. Let's talk Monday." Jonathan stared at the screen, then looked toward the hall. Lucas was his, legally now, but emotionally, that was earned in inches. He walked quietly into Lucas's room, saw the boy curled beneath the covers, one hand still clutching the compass. Jonathan whispered, "You're not a visitor. You belong here." Lucas stirred, eyes fluttering open. "You came back." "Always," Jonathan said softly. He tucked the blanket tighter, placed the compass on the nightstand beside the train and the court drawing. 3 objects, 3 promises. And none of them would be broken. The city buzzed beneath them, but inside the penthouse the world moved slower. Jonathan leaned over the kitchen table, helping Lucas build a miniature train diorama. Trees made of wire, cotton ball clouds, cardboard tracks. "Can I keep this in my room when it's done?" Lucas asked, gluing a tiny station in place. "Anywhere you want," Jonathan replied. "It's yours." Lucas smiled. "I think I'll call it Union Hope Station." Jonathan paused. "Why that name?" "Because it's where people find each other again." The words landed like a stone in Jonathan's chest. Later that day, they took a trip across town to a bookstore. Jonathan had quietly reserved a corner for a private tutoring pod. A soft-spoken instructor named Layla met them there. Lucas stood close to Jonathan, eyes wide at the bookshelves stacked like towers. "Don't worry," Jonathan whispered. "I'm staying." Lucas nodded and followed Layla into the reading nook. As the hour passed, Jonathan browsed the nearby aisle, pretending to read. Every few minutes he glanced toward Lucas. The boy sat cross-legged on a beanbag, tracing letters with his finger, focused. Afterward, in the back seat of the car, Lucas held a slim book tight to his chest. "Can I keep this?" Jonathan smiled. "Of course." Lucas opened to the first page. "It's about maps, all kinds. I want to make one of my life someday." Jonathan looked out the window. "That'd be a map worth following." Back at the penthouse, Lucas placed the book beside his train, compass, and court drawing. 4 things now, each a piece of where he came from and where he was going. That evening, Jonathan sat at his desk reviewing quarterly reports, but his mind wandered. He picked up the court drawing Lucas had once given the judge. On the back, he noticed a second page had been taped on. It was a newer note. "If I get lost again, he'll come find me. I believe that now." Jonathan swallowed hard. He walked to Lucas's room and stood at the door, watching his son sketch something by lamplight. "What you working on?" he asked. Lucas looked up. "A blueprint of our train world. I even put a cafe in it because I know you always get coffee." Jonathan laughed. "You know me too well." Lucas held up the paper. "Look what I made, Dad." Jonathan walked in, knelt beside him. The drawing was incredible. Tracks winding through valleys. A small figure stood in a conductor's hat, pointing forward. "Is that me?" Jonathan asked. Lucas shook his head. "That's me. You're in the caboose, making sure I don't fall off." Jonathan couldn't speak. He just nodded, proud. Later, as they cleaned up, Jonathan cleared his throat. "I was thinking, maybe we can turn the guest room into a library, for your maps and models." Lucas's eyes widened. "Really? It'll be your space to dream," Jonathan said. "As big as you want." Lucas hesitated. "Is it okay if I still sleep near you sometimes?" Jonathan knelt again. "You can sleep wherever you feel safe." Lucas hugged him without a word. For a boy who used to sleep under concrete and noise, warmth didn't come easy. But it came. And that night, Lucas didn't close his door. He left it open. Just a crack, just enough to let trust in. The wind howled outside the penthouse windows, rattling against the glass like fingers tapping to be let in. Inside, the lights were dimmed, the fireplace flickered low, and Lucas sat curled on the couch, arms wrapped around his knees. Jonathan entered the room with 2 mugs, hot cocoa and chamomile tea. "Here," he said gently, handing one to Lucas. "Figured you could use something warm." Lucas took the cup, but didn't sip. His eyes were fixed on the wall, where his drawing of Union Hope Station hung above the mantel. It looked lonely tonight. "What's going on?" Jonathan asked, sitting beside him. Lucas shrugged. "I don't know. I feel weird." Jonathan waited. "It's like," Lucas continued, "everything's too perfect, and that means something bad's going to happen." Jonathan took a long breath. "That feeling, it's not uncommon, especially when you've been hurt before." Lucas glanced up. "How do you stop it?" "You don't," Jonathan said softly, "but you learn not to believe it every time." Lucas nodded, but his eyes were glassy. That week, he'd started his first full day with a group of students in a new enrichment program. Jonathan had hoped it would bring confidence. Instead, Lucas came home quieter than ever. Later that night, Jonathan found a paper in the trash can. A crumpled drawing. Lucas standing in front of a school building surrounded by kids. He'd sketched himself smaller than everyone else. At the bottom, a single line. "Don't belong." Jonathan smoothed it out and tucked it into his briefcase. The next morning, he waited until Lucas finished brushing his teeth. "Want to walk with me today?" Jonathan asked. "To school?" Lucas blinked. "You're not too busy?" Jonathan smiled. "You're never a distraction." As they walked down the block, Lucas fidgeted with the compass hanging from his backpack strap. "I saw you kept that close," Jonathan said. Lucas nodded. "I figured if I got lost in there, I'd at least know how to get back to you." They stopped at the entrance. A group of boys nearby whispered and looked at Lucas's shoes. Still a bit worn, still his favorite, Jonathan knelt down. "You know what makes a conductor strong?" Lucas tilted his head. "They guide the train, even if the passengers don't believe in the tracks." Lucas cracked a smile. "That's cheesy." Jonathan laughed. "So are most truths." Lucas walked through the doors, but looked back once. Jonathan raised a fist and Lucas returned it, quiet, but solid. Hours later, Jonathan returned home to find Lucas's door open. His son stood by the window, staring out at the river. "Rough day?" Jonathan asked. Lucas shrugged. "One kid said I'd dress like a garbage truck." Jonathan knelt beside him. "And what did you say?" "I told him garbage trucks carry what people leave behind, but they still show up every day." Jonathan blinked, then pulled Lucas into a hug. "You're something else." Lucas reached into his backpack, pulling out another folded paper. This time, it was a drawing of the school hallway. Gray lockers, bright windows. But in the corner, a small compass floated in the air, glowing like a beacon. "I put it in the picture," Lucas said. "So I remember I always have a way home." Jonathan took the drawing gently. "This one goes in my office." That night, as Lucas drifted to sleep, Jonathan stood in the doorway, watching his son beneath the blanket of stars on the midnight wall. There had been doubts. There were still challenges, but the cracks in Lucas's heart, they were starting to fill, with trust, with belonging, and with a compass that pointed not north, but home. The sun had barely set, casting long gold streaks across the penthouse floor. Jonathan sat on the rug, sorting through Lego train parts with Lucas, who was carefully attaching tiny wheels to a plastic engine. "Check this out," Lucas said, holding up the finished piece. "It's a cargo train. I made it carry letters." Jonathan smiled. "Messages always get where they're supposed to, right?" Lucas nodded. "Especially if someone's waiting." They set the train on its tracks. As it rolled, it passed a small paper station Lucas had labeled Blake Terminal. Jonathan's phone buzzed on the coffee table. He hesitated, then picked it up. The screen flashed a familiar name. Board Chairman. Urgent. He answered quietly. "Blake." A voice barked through. "Jonathan, you've got headlines. Photos of you and a kid exiting the courthouse. Media's asking questions. About paternity. About the Blake estate." Jonathan stood, tension rising. "I've handled the legal side. This is personal." "Well, it's public now. Investors want clarity." He hung up and looked down at Lucas. Still playing. That innocence. He wouldn't let the world turn it into pressure. The next day, news vans parked outside the Westbridge building. Headlines streamed across tablets. Financial CEO's surprise son. Heir to the empire or PR distraction? Jonathan walked through the lobby, head high, suit sharp, but inside his thoughts swirled. Executives watched him with thinly veiled curiosity. Whispers trailed behind every step. At lunch, he sat across from his COO, a thin, serious man named Dennis. "Jonathan, I say this respectfully," Dennis began, "but is this child situation sustainable?" "He's not a situation," Jonathan said flatly. "He's my son." Dennis raised a brow. "The board worries about optics." Jonathan narrowed his eyes. "Optics didn't build this company. I did. From nothing. If they have an issue, they can speak to me directly." Back home that evening, Jonathan found Lucas waiting by the door, compass in hand, backpack on. "Where were you?" Lucas asked, trying to sound casual. "Meetings," Jonathan said, loosening his tie. "They went long." Lucas nodded slowly. "You forgot to text." Jonathan sat on the bench beside him. "You're right. I should have." Lucas looked down. "It felt like before, when I was invisible." Jonathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, flat box. Inside was a silver nameplate for Lucas's train world. It read, "Conductor, Lucas Blake." "I've been thinking," Jonathan said. "This world we're building? You deserve a title." Lucas traced the letters, eyes wide. "Really? You've been leading the whole time." Lucas smiled, but then asked, "Did your work people get mad about me?" Jonathan hesitated. "Some, but they don't know you like I do." Lucas looked thoughtful. "Maybe they should." Jonathan blinked. "What do you mean?" Lucas stood, walked over to the dining table, and pulled out a folded drawing from his backpack. "It's a speech," he said. "I wrote it in case anyone asks who I am." Jonathan opened the paper. Inside was a shaky sentence in the colored pencil. "My name is Lucas Blake. I like stars, trains, and second chances." Jonathan's throat closed up. "I want to say it someday," Lucas said, "if it helps." Jonathan knelt down. "It will, but only if you want to, not because you have to." Lucas nodded. "I know." That night they added the nameplate to the train table. Lucas stepped back, hands on his hips. "Looks official," he said proudly. Jonathan smiled. "Because it is." Later, when Lucas fell asleep, Jonathan returned to the living room. He placed the drawing on his desk next to the compass. Headlines could change. Markets could fall. But in the silence of that room, one truth held steady. He hadn't just found a son. He'd found the reason to stay standing. The penthouse buzzed with an unfamiliar tension as Jonathan stared at his phone. Notifications lit up. News alerts, social media posts, whispers from the financial world. Lucas's existence had broken into his meticulously ordered life, and now the world wanted answers. "Dad?" Lucas's small voice cut through the silence. He stood in the doorway, clutching his backpack, eyes wide. Jonathan swallowed. "It's the news. People are talking about us." Lucas shuffled inside, setting his bag down gently. "Are they mad?" Jonathan knelt, searching the boy's face. "Some might be, but what matters is what we know, that we're family." Lucas looked down, voice trembling. "I don't want to be a story." Jonathan reached out, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "You're more than headlines, Lucas. You're my son, and I'm going to protect that." That night, reporters camped outside Westbridge's headquarters, flashbulbs firing. Emails poured in, some supportive, others skeptical. The board called for a meeting. Jonathan stood before his team the next morning, calm but resolute. "This isn't just a private matter, it's our reality now. Lucas is part of my life and our future. One executive raised a concern. "Sir, the optics are complicated. Investors question stability." Jonathan's gaze hardened. Stability comes from honesty, from heart, not just numbers. Back home, Lucas drew quietly in his room, the midnight blue wall glowing softly behind him. He sketched two figures holding hands beneath a glowing train station. Jonathan entered, watching the boys' careful strokes. "Look what I made, Dad," Lucas said, holding up the drawing. Jonathan smiled. "It's beautiful. You captured hope." Lucas bit his lip. "Sometimes I'm scared that people only see the news, not me." Jonathan sat beside him. "Then we'll show them the real story, the one where family wins." Days later, Jonathan agreed to a televised interview. Cameras clicked, lights brightened the studio. He spoke honestly about regret, redemption, and rebuilding trust. Lucas watched from backstage, gripping the compass Jonathan had given him. After the interview, as they walked through a nearby park, Lucas tugged Jonathan's sleeve. "Dad, do you think they believe you?" Jonathan knelt, pointing to the compass. "It's not about what they believe. It's about what we do, every day." Lucas smiled, eyes shining. "Then let's make sure our story is one worth telling." Jonathan wrapped an arm around him. The city skyline glowed behind them, a promise of new beginnings. In that moment, under the vast sky, a father and son stepped forward together, ready to face whatever came next. The studio lights burned bright, the hum of cameras and murmurs from the crew filling the quiet moments before Jonathan stepped onto the stage. The backdrop was a soft blue, the logo of the National Morning Show glowing behind him. Jonathan took a deep breath. Lucas sat beside him, fingers intertwined with his father's, eyes wide but steady. The host smiled warmly. "Jonathan Blake, CEO and father. Your story has touched millions. What made you decide to share it today?" Jonathan looked down at Lucas, then back to the cameras. "I realized that no amount of success mattered if I wasn't here for him. Millions of children don't have homes, don't have families. I want to change that." Lucas squeezed his hand. "It's scary," he whispered. Jonathan nodded. "It is, but hope is stronger." The conversation turned to homelessness, the struggle of children like Lucas who survive in the shadows. Jonathan cited data. 1.5 million children in the U.S. experience homelessness each year, many unseen, unheard. "I want to do more than just tell our story," Jonathan said firmly. "I'm launching a charity, Union Hope. It will provide shelter, education, and support for kids like Lucas." Lucas's eyes sparkled. "Can I help?" Jonathan smiled, pride swelling. "You'll lead our first camp this summer." Later, as the interview wrapped, Jonathan and Lucas walked outside into the crisp morning air. The city felt different, full of possibility. "Do you think people will help?" Lucas asked. Jonathan looked up at the rising sun. "They already are, because this is bigger than us. It's about every child waiting for a chance." Lucas pulled out his drawing, the one with the train, the stars, and the two figures holding hands. Jonathan traced the lines. "This symbol, hope, trust, and home. That's what we're building together." Lucas grinned. "Look what I made, Dad." Jonathan hugged him tightly. "The best thing I've ever seen." And in that embrace, amid the city's waking light, a father and son stepped into a future they would build. One journey, one star, one child at a time. The sun dipped low over the city skyline, painting the penthouse in warm hues of gold and rose. The room buzzed softly with laughter and chatter as children's voices filled the air. Jonathan stood beside Lucas, watching the group of kids dart between tents, their faces alive with wonder. "Dad, come see!" Lucas called, tugging at Jonathan's sleeve. Jonathan followed him to a circle of children, where Lucas held up a model train painted bright blue, decorated with tiny stars and the words Union Hope Express along its side. It's our train, Lucas said proudly. For the camp, so everyone remembers to keep moving forward. Jonathan's eyes shimmered. You built this? Lucas grinned. With help, but mostly me. Nearby, a volunteer approached Jonathan. The kids love it. You've created more than a camp. They have a home here. Jonathan nodded, heart full. That's why we're here. The camp was the culmination of months of work, a place where homeless children could find safety, education, and hope. Lucas's story had sparked a movement, inspiring donations and volunteers from across the country. Later, Jonathan and Lucas sat beneath a canopy of stars, the campfire crackling between them. Lucas traced patterns in the dirt with a stick. Do you think Mom would have liked this? He asked softly. Jonathan smiled, watching the flames dance. She would have been proud. Lucas looked up. I'm proud, too. Of us. Jonathan pulled from his pocket the worn train ticket, the very one that had started it all. I want you to have this, he said, pressing it into Lucas's hand. A reminder that every journey has a beginning. Lucas clasped the ticket tightly. I won't lose it. Jonathan ruffled his hair. Neither will I. As the firelight flickered, Jonathan reflected on their path, from strangers to family, from loss to redemption. There had been struggles, fear, doubt, and the cold glare of public scrutiny, but through it all, love had prevailed. Lucas leaned against him. Look what I made, Dad. Jonathan smiled, eyes glistening. The best thing I've ever seen. And beneath the stars, surrounded by new friends and endless possibility, a father and son knew they were finally home.